The US dollar is used all over the world, not just inside the United States, but across global trade, banking, and financial markets. From oil transactions to international loans to central bank reserves, the dollar plays a central role. But here's the real question. How did one country's currency become so widely used? Today, the numbers are striking. Around 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars. Nearly half of global trade invoices are priced in dollars, and about 88% of all foreign exchange transactions involve the dollar. That means most large financial transactions in the world connect to the dollar in some way. This level of usage is not just about currency. It reflects how the global financial system is structured. To understand how this happened, we need to look at three key factors. First, economic strength. Second, global trade networks. And third, what economists call network effects. A network effect happens when a system becomes more valuable, simply because more people use it. For example, a language becomes global when more people speak it. A technology becomes dominant when more people adopt it. Currencies can work the same way. A currency doesn't become global just because it is strong. It becomes global because it is widely used, but this wasn't always the case. Before the US dollar, another currency played that role, the British pound. And understanding how the pound rose and then declined is the first step to understanding the dollar. Because global currency leadership doesn't happen suddenly, it shifts gradually so as the world economy changes. And the shift from the pound to the dollar is one of the most important examples of that process. Before the US dollar became widely used globally, the dominant international currency was the British pound. For much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, the United Kingdom was one of the world's leading economic powers. Its currency was used in trade, finance, and international settlements. But that position didn't last forever. To understand why the pound was dominant, we need to look at the structure of the global economy at the time. The British Empire had one of the largest trading networks in history. It connected regions across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. This created a system where trade routes were linked, financial flows were centralized, and the pound was widely used within that network. A currency becomes global when it is embedded inside a large economic network. In addition, London was one of the most important financial centers in the world. Banks, insurers, and trading companies all operated using the pound. So the pound wasn't dominant by accident. It was supported by trade, finance, and global reach. But this system began to change after World War I. The United Kingdom faced significant economic pressure. War expenses increased debt, and maintaining global influence became more difficult. At the same time, the United States was moving in the opposite direction. Instead of borrowing, the US became a major lender. The UK was sending capital out, while the US was receiving capital in. Gold began to flow into the United States, and financial activity started shifting. Currency strength often follows capital flows. By the 1920s, this shift became more visible. The US economy expanded, industrial production increased, and trade activity grew rapidly. At the same time, the US accumulated a significant share of global gold reserves. This strengthened confidence in the dollar. But here's what's important. The dollar didn't suddenly replace the pound. Both currencies were used side by side for a period of time. Global currency transitions are gradual, not immediate. So why did the dollar eventually overtake the pound? There are three key reasons. The United States became one of the largest economies in the world. More production meant more trade, and more trade meant more demand for its currency. The US had growing financial markets. Banks, bonds, and investment systems expanded. This made it easier for global participants to hold and use dollars. With large gold reserves, the dollar was seen as relatively stable at the time. The UK had global influence, but rising debt. The US had growing economic power and increasing financial strength. The dominant currency tends to align with the dominant economy. But there is one more factor that is often overlooked: network effects. As more countries started using the dollar, and it became more practical for others to use it too. This created a reinforcing cycle. The more the dollar was used, the more useful it became. And the more useful it became, the more it was used. This is how a currency transitions from regional to global. By the early 20th century, the shift from the pound to the dollar was already underway. But the biggest transformation was still ahead, because it would take a global event to fully reshape the system. By the late 1930s, the global economic system was already under pressure. Trade disruptions, financial instability, and geopolitical tensions were affecting many economies. Then came a major turning point after World War II. And this event didn't just reshape countries, it reshaped the global financial system. At the end of the war, like many economies were rebuilding. Infrastructure had been damaged, industries were disrupted, financial systems needed stability, but not all countries were in the same position. The United States had a different outcome. Its economy expanded during the war. Its production capacity increased, and its financial system remained intact. While many countries were rebuilding, the U.S. was already operating at scale. While others faced shortages, the U.S. held resources. By the mid-1940s, the United States held around 70% of the world's gold reserves. This created a unique position, a country with both economic strength and financial resources. At that point, the world faced a key challenge. How do you rebuild global trade without a stable monetary system? The old system, based on gold alone, was no longer sufficient for a rapidly growing global economy. The system needed to evolve from something limited to something scalable. And that led to one of the most important agreements in financial history. In 1944, representatives from 44 countries met to design a new system. This became known as the Bretton Woods Agreement. The structure they created was simple, but powerful. The US dollar was linked to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. Other currencies were then linked to the dollar. Gold to the US dollar to other currencies. This created a layered system. Instead of every country holding gold, they could hold US dollars and still maintain confidence in value. This made global trade more efficient. The dollar became a central reference point for the entire system. So why did this system work? First, simplicity. Instead of managing multiple currency relationships, countries used one central reference. Second, stability. The link to gold helped maintain confidence. Third, liquidity. Dollars were widely available, making transactions easier. A pure gold system was stable, but limited. A multi-currency system was flexible, but complex. The Bretton Woods system balanced both. It wasn't perfect, but it was practical. This video is not about judging the system, but simply understanding how it works. Once this system was in place, its effects began to spread. Countries held dollars as reserves. Trade was conducted in dollars. Financial markets used dollars as a reference. The system reinforced itself. The more it was used, the more useful it became. And this is where the dollar moved, from important to essential. But over time, the system began to face new pressures. Because as global trade expanded, the system itself had to evolve again. And that would lead on to one of the biggest changes in modern financial history. By the 1960s, the Bretton Woods system had been in place for over 2 decades. Global trade was expanding, financial flows were increasing, and more US dollars were circulating worldwide. But the system had a built-in limitation. Under the system, the US dollar was linked to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. But as more dollars were issued globally, the amount of gold did not increase at the same pace. This created a mismatch. There were more dollars in circulation than the gold available to support them. The system was scaling faster than its original design allowed. Some countries began to question whether all dollars could be converted into gold if needed, and that raised an important concern. In 1971, the United States ended the direct convertibility of dollars into gold. This marked the end of the Bretton Woods gold link. From that point on, the dollar was no longer tied directly to gold. The system had changed fundamentally. Now here's what makes this moment so important. Despite the change, the US dollar did not lose its global role. It remained widely used in trade, finance, and reserves. Why? There are several key reasons. First, existing system structure. By 1971, global trade was already heavily based on the dollar. Changing that system would have required rebuilding how transactions were conducted worldwide. Once a system becomes widely adopted, it becomes difficult to replace quickly. Second, network effects. The dollar was already used by many countries, and as more participants used it, it became even more practical for others to do the same. The system reinforced itself. Third, financial infrastructure. Global financial markets, including banking, lending, and investment, were already structured around the dollar. This created continuity, even after the gold link ended. The strength of a currency can depend on the system around it, not just what backs it. Let's compare the system before and after 1971. Before, dollar linked to gold. Fixed exchange rates, structured but limited system. After, no direct gold backing, more flexible exchange rates. Larger and more adaptive system. The earlier system offered structure, the later system offered flexibility. And flexibility allowed the system to grow further. After 1971, the global financial system continued to expand. Trade increased, capital flows accelerated, financial markets became more interconnected. And throughout this expansion, the dollar remained widely used, not because it was tied to gold, but because it was already integrated into the system. This highlights an important idea. A system does not always depend on its original foundation. Over time, it can become self-sustaining. The dollar didn't remain global because of gold. It remained global because of usage. And this brings us to the present, where the dollar continues to play a major role in an even more complex global system. But how does it compare to other major currencies today? Today, the US dollar remains widely used across the global economy. But an important question often comes up. If the system has evolved, why hasn't another currency replaced the dollar? To answer that, we need to compare it with other major currencies. Let's start with the US dollar. It is currently about 60% of global foreign exchange reserves, around 80 to 90% of foreign exchange transactions. Widely used in trade, finance, and global markets. But numbers alone don't explain everything. What matters is not just usage, but how deeply a currency is integrated into the system. Now let's compare the dollar with the euro. The euro is one of the largest currencies in the world. It is widely used across Europe and represents a major economic region. In terms of global reserves, the euro accounts for roughly 20%. So why hasn't it overtaken the dollar? One reason is fragmentation. The euro is used by multiple countries, each with its own fiscal policies and economic conditions. This creates complexity. The US operates as a single fiscal system. The euro area is a shared currency across multiple economies. Consistency can matter as much as size. Next, the Japanese yen. Japan has one of the largest economies in the world, and its currency is widely traded. But in global reserves, the yen accounts for a much smaller share. Why? One factor is usage. The yen is actively traded in financial markets, but less commonly used in global trade. A currency can be strong domestically, but still have limited global reach. Global currency status depends on usage across multiple systems, not just economic size. Now let's look at China's currency, the yuan. China is one of the largest trading economies in the world. Its global influence has grown significantly. The use of the yuan in international trade has also increased over time. However, its share of global reserves remains relatively smaller compared to the dollar. One key factor is convertibility. A widely used global currency typically needs to move freely across borders. Another factor is financial market depth. Large, liquid financial markets make it easier for global participants to hold and use a currency. The US has deep, highly liquid financial markets. Other systems are still developing in that area. Global currency adoption often depends on openness and accessibility. So when we compare major currencies, we see a pattern. The dollar is not just widely used, it is deeply embedded across multiple systems: trade, finance, reserves, debt markets. It operates across more layers of the global economy. Other currencies may be strong in specific areas, but less integrated overall. There is another important factor: switching cost. Changing a global currency system is not just about choosing a different currency. It requires rewriting contracts, adjusting pricing systems, rebuilding financial infrastructure. That process is complex and takes time. The more widely a system is used, the harder it becomes to replace. So the reason the dollar remains dominant is not just about one factor. It is a combination of history, economic scale, financial infrastructure, and network effects. But this doesn't mean the system will never change, because global systems continue to evolve, and the future of currencies depends on how these systems develop over time. So what could change this system in the future? So if the US dollar became global over time, an important question remains: will it always stay that way, or could the system evolve again? To explore this, it's important to understand something first. Global currency systems don't usually change suddenly. They tend to evolve gradually, as economic conditions, trade patterns, and financial systems develop. Change in these systems is often slow and shaped by long-term trends. One possible direction is a more diversified system. Instead of one dominant currency, multiple currencies could play larger roles in different regions. For example, some trade may be conducted in dollars, some in euros, some in other currencies. This could reduce reliance on a single currency while increasing flexibility, but it could also make global systems more complex. Another factor to consider is technology. Digital payments, financial innovation, and new systems for transferring value are evolving over time. These developments may influence how currencies are used globally. But even with new technology, existing systems often continue alongside them. There is also a third possibility. The current system continues, with gradual adjustments over time, because the dollar is already deeply integrated across trade, finance, and reserves. Systems that are widely used tend to persist. So rather than asking, will one currency replace another? A more useful question might be, how will the system evolve over time? Because global currency systems are not static. They are shaped by trade, technology, and how people use them. Looking back, the US dollar did not become global overnight. It emerged through decades of economic activity, financial development, and repeated use. And that process is still ongoing. So the story of the dollar, it is not just about one country or one currency. It's about how global systems are built and how they evolve over time. Because in the end, money is not just about value, it's about trust, usage, and the system behind it.